Yeah, we're still worried about flooding and those king tides. Obviously, as the tide comes in this morning, that's pretty well much the unknown. As we're seeing the rivers starting to slowly abate, which is positive. We're just not sure how they'll interact with those high tides. So we're not taking anything for granted, and I have to commend the SES for the work that they've done. You also got to overlay that with the fact that catchments are very wet at the moment, and the Bureau is still predicting rain again today. So we're still not out of the woods yet, and it's important that people adhere to the advice of SES about their direction and what they should be doing. This isn't a she'll be right sort of moment. We have to make sure that we continue to treat this very seriously. We listen to the agencies and act promptly.
Some of those pictures out of Byron Bay, in particular Main Beach, were quite staggering when it comes to all of that erosion. Do you think that there's going to have to be extra government help that's going to be provided to these places to kind of get over that?
Yeah, look, the assessments will start to be made now once it's safe, after the SES personnel deem it safe for other agencies to come in and make assessments. So once those assessments are made, obviously there are disaster recovery arrangements between state and federal government. They are long-standing and ones in which we've always upheld. So once those assessments are made, we'll obviously work with both Queensland, where there's been some damage, and New South Wales around any financial assistance is required from the federal government.
Okay, just on to China, have you had it confirmed yet that China has in fact blacklisted our coal?
We've had no formal notification. Obviously, there's still mootings through their state-owned media outlets, but that isn't the protocol in which WTO rules and, in fact, CHAFTA are formed. It's, in fact, through formal channels that notification needs to be made, and so we expect that the Chinese government, in fact, notifies Australia officially if that is their position.
So you'd keep the ships where they are at the moment, you'd park them there, or when do you start moving them on?
Well, obviously that's a commercial decision, for the exporters. But the reality is this is where the Chinese government needs to rectify this and verify this very quickly. We are a rules-based trading nation, and we expect those that sign agreements with us to do the same. And in fact, the world is watching. The world is watching very closely to the actions of China, not only on coal but on other matters that they have dealt with the Australian government and Australian exporters. So it's important that the Chinese government come out very clearly and verify or rectify this very quickly, because the world is becoming anxious about trading with China if they continue to have behaviour that isn't consistent with the agreements that we've put in place and that they've signed up to, not only bilaterally, but in terms of WTO arrangements that they are a signatory to.
Maybe that's the point, though, that the world is watching and they're kind of making an example of us.
Well, that's a dangerous thing to do, because they need to trade with the world, and a simple business principle is the higher the risk, the higher the reward. And if it becomes the prevalence around the world that there is a higher understanding that there's a higher risk trading with China, then there will need to be a higher reward. It will ultimately cost China more. This is where it can be rectified quite quickly with dialogue, and we have continued never to turn our back from the fact that dialogue is the best way in which to resolve any difference. We continue to do that regardless, and I can assure you that I'll continue to reach out to my counterpart around that and making sure they understand my phone is always on and my door is always open to them.
So your view at the moment, stay the course, hold the line, that hasn't changed?
We have to be consistent. We're a rules-based trading nation, and we rely so heavily on trade that we just simply cannot turn our back on the rules in which we signed up to. We'd be no better than any other nation that we assert is not doing that. I mean, we're a values and principled nation as well, and we're a good global citizen. Our standing will stand us in good stead long term, and I think that's proven to be the case. We're a nation of 25 million people, and from an agricultural perspective, we produce enough food for 75 million. So if we don't engage with the world, don't trade with the world, then I don't need the number of farmers we've got in Australia. I don't need the regional communities to support them. And that's something I never want to think about.
When it comes to that coal, I think it's about 20% of our coal goes to China. Do you have any doubt that we'll be able to find buyers elsewhere to make up that shortfall?
Well, with respect to the coal that's there at the moment, most of our exports go into Japan and India, and in fact they continue to be consistent purchasers of Australian coal. So we'll continue to work with other trading partners, and that's why the government's always had a diversification model around other free trade agreements. There are 13 other free trade agreements that this government has mainly put in place. And so we need to continue to work on that, market access into other countries, and that's what Australia continues to do, diversify the risks and allow our exporters to make those commercial decisions predicated on the risk that they see within a particular market and be able to move into another one if they see fit.
Well, is there a positive in all of this, Minister? I mean, I'm talking about Lobster now. They're not taking our lobster anymore, but I'm seeing that Coles and Woolworths have placed buying limits on, those luxury items for Christmas. So, is there a positive in that we can buy our own produce here, or more of it?
Well, from a consumer perspective, maybe, but if I'm a lobster farmer, I'm probably a little bit of the contrary view with respect to that. But we have had significant other export markets with lobster. Before the chapter came in fact, we exported around 92% of our lobster into Vietnam, and Vietnam has become a very strategic partner to Australia, a good trading partner, a consistent trading partner. So we'll continue to look to try and reopen up some of those markets where exporters haven't necessarily gone to over the last couple of years.
Do you worry about what might come after we've run out, or China's run out of products to blacklist or place tariffs on? Are you thinking beyond that? A lot of people on our program have feared that maybe down the track conflict is an inevitable outcome. Are you going there?
No, I'm not. I think we need to be calm about this. Rules-based trading systems are there to protect one another, but trading is also one of the best ways in which to keep stability, not only in a regional perspective, but in a global perspective. And I think we've got to appreciate that there are bigger forces at play here that we need to continue to work through. And the best way to resolve any difference, any grievance, is through dialogue. And that's why Australia continues to show leadership and maturity in saying to not only China, but to any other nation that may feel they're aggrieved to Australia, that the best way is through dialogue. And we continue to make sure we will never turn our back on that. We'll be there when they're ready to talk. We will be there ready to talk with them.
Okay, just finally, unions want fruit pickers to be paid $25 an hour. What do you think about that? Do you think they'll get that?
Well, we'll let the Fair Work Commission make that determination. Let me say, the devil's in the detail, but we shouldn't generalise, and this is the danger that the unions have gone down, is they're generalising that farmers don't pay their employees appropriate wages, and in fact it's counterproductive to what the AWU is trying to achieve, is get Australians out working on farms. That is not the case. They're generalising the fact that there is a minority that have cut corners and have done the wrong thing, and they should be weeded out. They are a cancer within agriculture that need to be weeded out. But that's not unlike any other industry. Every other industry in the world, in fact, has people in it that tries to cut corners. That's human nature. But to generalise the way the AWU is effectively saying that Australian farmers are exploiting their employees, each and every one of them. And that is not the case. The vast majority of Australian producers, in fact, do the right thing. In fact, and we shouldn't generalise, it's not always a piecemeal payment method. Sometimes they do pay around that $24, $25 an hour, depending on the commodity and the type of method in which they have to harvest that crop. So we can't generalise. I think that's the risk that the AWU is putting out there. I'm not against what they're putting forward. I think we need to study the detail, but I think the generalisation they've made is in fact quite disingenuous to Australian farmers right across the country.